they wanted to invite me to US to meet Elon. And I said, of course I want to meet Elon. And I was prepared to meet Elon. And everybody was preparing me to meet Elon. I was just like, why is this all this preparing me to meet Elon something? That's weird. So I went into this interview, and normally I found out later that you are either in there for 15 minutes or 30 minutes. 15, you're out. 30 minutes, you probably have a chance. So I interviewed for 45 minutes. So apparently I had a good chance to actually get the job. So after I finished up the job, I got the offer.
Wow, that's awesome.
To build the Gigafactory.
JP Clausen is a highly accomplished manufacturing executive who has worked with some of the most recognizable brands in the world.
He oversaw manufacturing for LEGO in Denmark, Hungary, and Mexico, routinely improving KPIs and spearheading expansions for over 13 years.
He was personally hired by Elon Musk to build Tesla's first Gigafactory.
He created over $7 billion of enterprise value for Google, then went on to oversee 95,000 employees when he was brought on to be the executive vice president of global manufacturing of GM.
Well, I just like to fix things, really, and I think that apparently I have a good way to go in and find out where's the bottlenecks, where's the constraints, who is it that is blocking you, and don't take things for given. If you're in doubt, then you should ask, and if there's something you really want, then you have to say, I want this, and be clear about it. There are days where that was kind of a rough day, but other times you learned a lot from him, and he had this thing about first principle. And I took that away with me as well. Like, you have to do the simple thing you can do and build it up from there. When I came to Google, it took like 26 months to build a data center.
Wow.
And when I left, it took 9 months, which in this case was over 7 billion that I created of extra value for the company.
Wow, that's incredible. What do you think the hardest decision was that you've ever had to make as a leader?
It's always to
Hey guys, I'm James Danley. Welcome back to the Bulldogs podcast. Today I have a very special guest, a good friend of mine and a client, technically a humble farm boy from Denmark, but someone who has lived an extraordinary life all over the world and is one of the top engineering, manufacturing, and technology executives in the world. He launched Tesla's first Gigafactory, ran Google's data center operations, and recently oversaw over 95,000 employees as GM's executive vice president of global manufacturing. I'm very excited to have a conversation today with my good friend JP Clausen. So thanks for coming in, man.
Hey, good to see you, man.
I appreciate you, brother. So yeah, you the fist bump. So yeah, I just want to have a conversation. I think it's like you came from like such humble beginnings, and the life you've lived is like absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you've lived in 4 countries. You've been recruited by the top companies in the world to come and work for them and help them fix and solve a lot of problems, including like being hired by Elon Musk directly to be one of his top executives for a number of years and one of the longer standing executives that has worked at Tesla. So I would love to hear, have you just give a brief kind of overview of like your life story and your career trajectory for the audience to kind of like let them know what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. And James, thank you so much for inviting me. And naturally, this is something I'm looking forward to for a long time, just to talk to you about, my life. When you started to ask me about like, is it something you want to share with anybody else? I said, absolutely, because, if somebody could have some inspiration out of this, then I'm very happy about it. So first of all, I grew up as a farm boy, absolutely. I hustled myself through you can say the high school, and later I went into college. I took a job very early on in the as an engineer after I graduated as an industrial engineer, and then I basically worked myself up through the ranks and ended up as an executive in General Motors for 95,000 people. So I've been in 4 different countries, as you're saying. I started up in Denmark. I moved out when I was 35. Then I took 4 years in Hungary for LEGO at that time. I moved to Mexico, and then I had my last 10 years with Tesla, Google, and in the end, GM.
It's amazing, man. It's a wild career trajectory. It's so cool because it's like companies that are in very different industries that have needed your skill sets and the talents that you provided. So it's just wild. So let's go back and start at the beginning, man. Like, what was your home life like in Denmark? What were, I know that some of those value systems have shaped you in some of the conversations that we've had. And like,
yeah.
What do you think it is? What should we know about your childhood, I guess, that formed the foundation for your life that's led to you living this extraordinary life?
Well, first of all, we definitely grew up in an environment where there was not enough resources for everything we wanted to do. So from that perspective, we had to be humble, and we have to learn how to be loyal and also respectful for each other, because, you couldn't do everything you wanted in the world. So from that perspective, it's not like we were traveling a lot or experiencing a lot. So from that perspective, I helped mostly my dad at the farm. He was actually at a fish farm, and next to it there was a real farm with cattle. So he was the manager, and I grew up and I spent a lot of time with him. I had 2 older brothers, so I'm the youngest. So naturally, you have to fight a little bit harder to be recognized by your parents, right? So from that perspective, my father taught me some really good values in life, and so did my mother. And from that, I have like a lot of gratitude for them. My dad always said, like, you have to finish what you started. So that's true in life when you think about everything you're starting. Like, you start a new job, you start a new education, you start a new family. You have to finish what you started, and that had been stuck with me for a long, long time. So for that perspective, I always do that. The other part is that you have to deliver what you promise. So think about it like everything you do in life. You promise something to your friend, you promise something to your boss, you promise something to the bank. You promise a lot of things in this life, but you have to keep all those promises. So from an early start, my dad taught me that if I could party all night, I could also help in the morning. And no matter how much you felt sorry for yourself, he was always saying, hey, man, you promised to come up and help me, so you better get up and do what you have to do, right? My mother, she always, taught us how to be grateful. So think about like all the things that we do have. We should be grateful for those. So from that perspective, she actually taught us quite a bit about being grateful for things. The other thing that I recognized my mom, and she actually had cancer 3 times in life.
Wow.
And she always taught us like, you can maybe fall, but you have to raise and brush off the dust, right? So from that perspective, just continue standing up and kind of like fight for what you believe for. So she always taught us like to stand up for ourselves and be respectful for ourselves. And that has followed me actually through the life. And I've been very grateful for both of my parents.
That's amazing.
My brothers taught me a lot of things, how to kind of like maneuver in a family.
Were they rough on you? Were you the baby?
We were kind of rough with each other. So I have to say that we loved each other, but we were also quite tough with each other. So from that perspective, we're very different. So there are 7 years between my older brother and myself, and there's 3 years between the middle brother and myself. So we just grew up like 3 boys, and you can imagine how we were always like doing things that you shouldn't do. Right?
Rough housing and getting into trouble, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, my mom stayed. She kept the troops aligned, right? So from that perspective, that was good. And I looked quite a bit up to my older brother, because he was studying for engineering, and that's actually why I got the appetite for engineering. But also because all the technical things in the countryside, you need to do yourself. So do it yourself is something that I really appreciate, and I've been actually teaching that as a leader, that too many things are getting outsourced nowadays. So from that perspective, do it yourself and have the joy of working with technology and ensuring that you can actually fix your own bike, fix your own motorbike, fix your own car. So you can just go on and on, right? You can replace the engine or the transmission. All those things are really a great joy in life. You can build part of a house or a racking system, or whatever it is that you feel good about. But you should continue to build and be proud about it, because outsourcing is not the answer.
That's a very key insight. So it sounds like your dad he taught you commitment and like
Definitely.
follow through, and your mom taught you a perspective of gratitude, and then like also like never giving up.
Yes.
In the face of adversity, which are
Absolutely.
Extremely important values that if anyone holds all those, it can lead to a place of success for sure.
Yep.
So you mentioned your dad on the fish farm. So what were your earliest memories of working, or like an example? Like, did you actually work with your dad at a pretty young age, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I started to get my first paycheck when I was 8 years old.
All right.
Which is not really what you should do, right? But he paid me some pocket money for helping me. And later, when I was in the right age, I actually got the real job and started to get like a true paycheck, right? So I started my career very early, and what I did was I helped him drive around in the car. He was not supposed to do those things, but you can put it in low 4-wheel drive, and then you don't need to use the speedometer, so you can just drive the car almost by the clutch. So I helped him kind of like take like some view of whether the cattle was safe and how the whole the fish farm had to be managed, because we had to drive around between things. So I always try to help him with those things. And then later in life, I started to do some chores around feeding the fish and helping with all the management of a fish farm, because in the summer the oxygen goes down in the water, and you have to be careful how much you feed the fish. So you have to be
interesting.
You have to balance things quite a bit. And I was probably one of the kids out of 3 that he really trusted, that I could see if the fish was good or bad.
Really? Even as the youngest brother? That's impressive.
So if the fish flips, like if they start to flip because of oxygen, it's really a problem, because they will die in a matter of like 15 to half an hour.
Wow.
So you have to take care of them in the summertime. But in the wintertime, it's really not a problem. They just don't eat that much.
I didn't realize that seasonally you had to manage the fish differently. That's
totally
interesting.
Do.
That's wild.
And that's because the oxygen goes down, and also because that the fish digest more during the summertime. So when you overfeed them, you have to be careful. They grow quite fast.
So there's no way to add more oxygen to the water. You have to just monitor the food. You can.
Yeah. So what happens later is that when you got more and more technology built in and more environmental compliance into the fish farms, you actually recycle a lot of the water, and then you added oxygen into the water. So from that perspective, you just regulated the oxygen better. But you have to be on top of it, because you can also spend too much oxygen, and then it's too expensive, right? So you have to find that balance.
Interesting. That's amazing. So you're working at 8 years old. I had my first job, official job, at 10 when I got a paper up. But I think that's the best age to start working kids, honestly. I think the younger the better.
Yeah, naturally there is a truth to everything. It's also the individual, whether they can handle work at that age, right? But yes, if it's safe work, then definitely they should start early, in my opinion, too.
So you mentioned that with you being the youngest, like you had to vie a little bit more for maybe your father's attention or your parents' attention. Talk to me about that a little bit and what that looked like.
Well, it's just when you're 3 brothers, right? There is you always want some attention from someone, right? And I learned quite as a early on that I probably don't need all the attention, but the attention that you wanted to get, you have to be earning it. So the thing I did, instead of like where the person that yells the highest, I just did my chore better and try to be proud about what I'm doing, and therefore my parents recognized me more, actually. So doing your job well and doing what you're supposed to do and following some of those principles that your parents taught you actually helped in life later on. But it also helped with the respect from your parents, and they will trust you more, they'll give you more responsibility, they will do more things for you. So that's actually how it works.
That's very insightful. It's awesome that your parents did pay attention, that your dad trusted you at a young age.
He really did.
That's amazing.
I don't think he should all the time, but he did nevertheless.
That's amazing. So that's a cool background, man. I think it's a testament to your character, and like what your parents did teach those like young lessons affected the outcomes of your life.
Yeah,
so,
and maybe just to make like a little bit perspective of things, back then I'm born in 1972, so when you get 6 years old in Denmark, you have to go to the school, right, and start your school career, if you will. And from that perspective, I had to go take the bike, and when I was 6 years old, go to the bus, know all the time of the bus and when it's leaving, everything else, jump on the bus and get into the school and walk to school myself, right? And I'm just wondering today, with all the parents that is dropping their kids off and everything else, where did all that go, right? Because you learn in an early age. The first day I actually missed the bus, but the second day I didn't. So I learned quite fast how to navigate the bus routes and bus times, and later on I was biking to school. It was like 5-6 kilometers, so we're at 4 miles. I had to like bike to school every day. It doesn't matter whether it's cold or rainy, or you just did it, man. There's no car to deliver you in the front door, right?
Well, and also you learn consequences. The key issue with kids today is they remove all consequences. Like if you miss the bus, you miss the bus. There's consequences to that.
You have to remember that for the day after.
Yeah, if you don't plan ahead with weather and you don't have a rain jacket to ride your bike and you're soaking wet all day, there's consequences. I think you're exactly right. It definitely affects the younger generation for sure. being caught a little bit. So let's move forward. So talk to me about, obviously you went to university, you studied engineering, you were inspired by your older brother to do so. What did that first like career journey look like when you came out of school? Was there anything impactful about engineering school that changed your trajectory at all, or was it really the work experience that you received afterward?
Well, I think, there's many ways to do a career, right? So, there's people that kind of like stay in the school system until PhD, and there's other that drops out when they're finished with even school or high school. So there's nothing right or wrong in life, right? It's about whether you make something useful out of your life, in my opinion. So what I did was that I continued my school until I was done at bachelor. So I graduated as an engineering in industrial engineering, and that's really all the company systems that are related to manufacturing and ensuring that you can do lean manufacturing, optimize systems, and continue to think about how you optimize the business for the company. So that was my route in life, and I really enjoyed that. I was quite happy to work on it. The very first companies I joined after I graduated was all about when everything was on paper. So you write down orders, you put them into the manufacturing, you produce it, you give it back, you put the note for the freight company, they pick up the note and they read where to go and everything, right? There's even not a map to put in the truck anymore, right? Or at that time, sorry. So the thing was that everything was on paper. So I actually created some of the first ERP and MRP systems, which is really enterprise resource planning, and then the material resource planning that is existing in a company. So
and that was your first role out of school?
Yes, the first role out of the bachelor was that I was working in a kind of like a wooden industry. So what I did was that we made furnitures, and all those furnitures, you have a lot of parts and everything else, and all of it was a paper trail.
Sure.
So I simply put it into a computer system, and then we started to put screens out in the manufacturing and started to do different help to the employees so they could actually increase the throughput. So we doubled the throughput just by digitizing the whole manufacturing. But that was in a young age, and actually the next job I did was similar. That was just in the plastic industry. So we made profiles for different windows and everything else. So there's a lot of different plastic profiles that you're using that you don't recognize. So we did that as well, and we did the same with kind of like putting all the paper trails into the computers and really work on the optimization of the systems. I even read a book once called Quick Response Systems, where I just experimented to put everybody close together. So we were in the same office between sales and production and logistics and finance and everybody else. So when the customers call in, I could actually hear what they ordered. So in some cases, they will order something that we already were running out on the manufacturing floor. And we're saying, we don't have time for that, and we have to wait 14 days. And I knew that we could just prolong the production a little bit. So I said, well, if you pay $10,000, we can probably fit it in, right? So I optimized to have one changeover less, but I also got more profit out of it, right? So just by having those quick response teams of working together cross-functionally, I learned in a very early age in my career that actually works, and it really makes you agile, and thereby you can optimize your profitability for the company. So
what do you think it is that gave you the confidence to, because obviously when you got started, you're in that technology age where screens and data, everything is being digitized, right? That era was beginning. But there's a lot of people in that era that were working jobs that would not have taken the initiative or risk that you did to, one, try new things, and then two, group people together and then create efficiencies and take those risks. Do you think that had to do with your background and your dad trusting you and letting you work at a young age, or was that something that was naturally intuitive within you, or how do you explain that?
I think I can explain it best by experimenting, right? I experimented a lot when I was younger, of trying things, and there's a lot of things that didn't work, and there's a lot of things that works. And I started to be kind of positive thinking about the thing that works. So I always had this mantra of saying that what have to be true for you to do something. So what have to be true, not what is the risk or the problems or all the things that you can get stumbled within, right? So I think it's all about that you really think about it's possible. So when you think about it's possible, and that's, I can bridge that a little bit later to Elon, but that is when things are possible, you just go all in, and then you make it work. There's no question about that you doubt in your head that it cannot work.
You just act in full faith.
Yeah, you just
belief.
have to go full in and do it wholeheartedly, right?
So we were talking about the furniture company that you worked for, and then you worked for a plastics company.
Yeah.
And then it was within the plastics company that you were taking orders, and you convinced everyone to work as a group with all the departments.
Yes.
And then you're able to negotiate potentially higher prices based on production because you're all in the same.
Yeah.
Like you're able to communicate much more efficiently in one space. How long was it from there to before you got hired at LEGO, which was your first like really big career move?
Well, I worked like the first job was a couple of years. It was actually a really tough boss that I worked for. So
the furniture one?
Yeah, the furniture. So it was. I can tell you how tough it was. That one day, all the bookkeeping department all decided to walk out because they didn't want to work for him anymore.
The whole department quit.
The whole department.
That's usually a bad sign for leadership
perspective.
It's
kind of not good because they pay your paycheck. They kind of like make the taxes. They do everything, right? So it's probably not good that they walk out. And
That's
then he was
day.
looking around in the office and said like, "Who is the one that have the newest education?" And I was just like, that's probably me. You go to the booking department and figure it out. And you're an engineer, so you can solve problems, right? So what happens? I continued my digitization of the whole booking department. So now I didn't know only how to run the manufacturing. I also know how to run all the finances and everything else.
Wow.
So I took all the bookkeeping, the tax reporting, and I paid all the paychecks. And I put like you don't really know that, but behind all big systems, there's a counter for how many vacation hours and days and everything you're operating. They were doing it on paper, and I put it into the system. So now I could just let everybody know that called and say, how many vacation days do I have left? I said, look, I have 7.54 days because I knew it already. I can just look it up by their employee number. So all of the things are really helpful, and you can do so much more. And I think that helped me quite a bit during the time. So that was the first couple of years, and then I kind of like worked with a company called Prima, which was the extrusion company making plastic profile. So I probably worked there 4 years after that. And then I basically got this job offer at LEGO in 2001, where I started my career, and I stayed with LEGO for 14 years. So LEGO is an awesome company. That's where I got really the flavor of working for a great product in a great brand with good values, right? That was actually like similar to my dad's and my mom's way to think about it.
That's amazing that with LEGO being as large of a company and with as long of a history that they've been able to maintain that culture too. They
do. They really do. But that comes from it's a private held company. The owners are living their values, and they request the whole leadership to do the same. So yes, you have to be profitable and create value, but you have to be there for the kids.
Do you think that's something that gets lost when companies go public, or not in all situations? It's just
not in all situations. There is company that keeps their lineup of great products and high quality and continue to thrive, but it definitely makes them different when they go public.
So the fact that you had the experience, one, in the guts when the boss, everyone hates them, they quit, to then jump to a new department, learn it, figure it out, and digitize it, and then it gave you the financial background as well as overseeing the manufacturing. I mean, that's a really good foundation. But it came from like work ethic, competence, and then the ability to act on faith instead of fear. Yeah. And then just be willing to do things and believe you can figure them out, like believing in yourself.
Yeah, but it also honestly came from the fact that you have to stand up for yourself. There was some moments in my career, and I can mention them still, where you got like this, where somebody was doubting whether you were either truthful or whether you had the right intention, and then you stand up for yourself, and then you bite a little bit hard because no, but you have to because there is all of us have an edge somewhere, right? There's places in us that you can push yourself to a certain point, and then it's just enough, right? If you doubt your integrity, like it will be a problem. At least I think for you as well, James. So from that perspective, you need to draw the line in the sand and say this is enough, and then you have to tell who you are. And I did that a couple of times in my career, and I think that helped me because I got that lesson from my mom. When you get into really trouble, right, you have to stand up for yourself and say that I own it. I'll take care of it.
So what was the first time you had to do that? Which company was it with?
Well, it was really when we had those meeting in the first company making furnitures, and some of the meetings were we get together to get yelled at. If you will. so
by the boss, and no one
by
likes.
the boss. So he was a tough boss, right? It was okay, but one day I remember the sales manager have to. He wanted to take a couple of days of holidays, and we had a big order that we should submit. So that day, the boss really wanted to get the quote out. So I had to open his computer with his password and open the whole thing up. The spreadsheet was I could open the spreadsheet from my computer, but the spreadsheet was protected, and I didn't have the code for it. And I said, like, it's probably better that I don't get the code, so I don't do anything. And then he said, well, don't worry, I can do some of it remote. So he did some updates of the spreadsheet. We printed out the quote. We sent it to, and this time we made like some few furniture for IKEA as well. So you can imagine how many units it was. So we sent this, and the quote was wrong.
Oh no!
So next day, my boss came and he was mad, like you had never seen him like this before. and I have been lying for him, and I have been doing all kind of things. And I said,
for the guy that was on vacation.
Yeah, so I just told him, listen, I have not lied for you. I've not changed a single digit in this spreadsheet. I printed out because he was on vacation. And if you don't trust me, it's your problem.
Oh, the boss was accusing you of
Yes.
lying. Why,
Yeah.
what would be the reason for
Because
that?
he said, like, I changed the numbers. And I said, I didn't change any numbers.
Wow.
I didn't even have the password to change anything in the Excel spreadsheet. So I got so mad that I slammed the door so hard that the frame cracked around the door. And then I walked out to my work desk, and I sat there, and I was sitting there for almost like 4 or 5 hours. I went out to do some work on the manufacturing because I was trying to optimize some of the planning. I went home. There was said no word that day. Next day in the morning, I came. He caught me on the way to from the parking into the factory. And he said, like, I've not been sleeping all night. And I said, that's good.
He's worried you're going to leave.
No, so I said, like, that's good because what you did to me yesterday, that's not okay. Because I would never, ever do anything to harm the company. I'll never, ever change any numbers. I would never, ever lie to you, ever. That's just where my line in the sand was. And then also when I quit the job, it was also a moment of truth where I kind of like were sitting because the way that he was working with you was that he was silent until you started to talk, and then he always had the favor of the last word, right? So there was just a moment, and then there was some other moments when I was at LEGO, actually, when I was in Hungary. Somebody was really mad about the whole situation of not being expatriated to the company because I didn't want to hire them, so they really wanted to hurt me.
Someone that you didn't hire?
Somebody we didn't move from Denmark to Hungary because they wanted to work in Hungary. And I said, well, I don't think we need your skills or competences at the moment because we have somebody in Hungary who can take care of it. So he got like so mad that he accused me for going on a hunting trip into Russia. And I just said, like, and then my boss called me and he was like furious about it. And I said, like, I think you should investigate all the details around this. And then you call me again. I don't even want to hear about this stuff, right? So if you want to be serious about what you're talking about, then you have fact check
and actually know what's actually going on.
Yeah. So you call me.
Especially if you're going to attack someone's
because I can
character.
tell you one thing is that I've never been into Russia and been on a hunting trip ever in my life. And if you say that, then just fire me. I don't care. So I'd rather be fired for something that I know that's not true than live up with that stuff. So those kind of things in moment where my integrity or that I'm not telling the truth or I bite back because I'm an honest person. And I always
and
been,
you value
and my
that.
dad always taught me to be that. So why shouldn't I? I made a lot of mistakes and I do things that is not right all the time. I make mistakes, but I always like stand up and say like, listen, I made this mistake. That's what
awesome.
you can do.
That's a great way to live. And I think that like people don't hold to their integrity and values as much as they used to. And I think it affects performance and quality and career trajectory, and I think that's a great lesson for people to learn, especially the younger generation that might not be surrounded with people that have strong moral
and I
fabric.
think you've been working with me in the real estate as well, and you know that I'll not leave anything behind that's not working.
No, 100%, yeah.
So
you go above and beyond.
I tell you the truth. If something's wrong, then I cannot hand it over and just like close my eyes and forget about there is something wrong significantly in your house you're selling or a car you're selling or something you give your children or you help your mother-in-law or your father-in-law with. You cannot you have to stand up and say, like, this is not working. I need to fix it before I can give it to you, right?
That's a great way to live. And I think that it's a life philosophy that comes back to you. I think there are spiritual laws of cause and effect. And when you live in that way and you hold your character and you pass those things on, like, it comes back tenfold to you.
That's what I believe it will.
So let's talk about how you made that transition to, obviously you had these are informative, like, years where you learned a lot and developed great skill sets. Exactly. And to stand up to difficult bosses and leadership. So how did you end up making that jump? Like, who helped you get hired, or how'd you get hired to LEGO? And then what'd that career journey look like?
I think that's it's quite interesting, because I only applied for my first job. Since then, somebody
Oh, really? They just call you every time?
Somebody has called me since then, and I don't know what I'm doing. It's and I'm sorry, I'm simply too humble for kind of like, understanding all of it. But what I have to say is that I just applied for my first job. The rest have been calls to me for different reasons. It's always like somebody figured out in the industry that I was around and they wanted to hire me. They heard about me, and you've been in some industrial settings, or you've been speaking to something, or you've been that's how it kind of like works much better. So you need to build relations, be a trustworthy person, earn your credits, and then I think most of it will actually work it out selves.
So the only job you've ever applied for is the first one you had?
That's true.
That is unbelievable.
And it's in 4 different countries, right? So.
Wow. So LEGO came and hired you then away from the company you're working
Yes.
for at the time.
Yep.
And what was the role that they needed you for, or how that happened?
So I started in the right manufacturing, in my opinion. So that was the injection molding department, where we made the bricks. We made billions and billions of bricks every year.
That's wild.
And I can tell you those bricks are quite accurate. So if you stack them, and you stack next to it, you stack another stack, they are very accurate.
They're all the same.
They're all the same. And the reason for that is that the repeatability and how you actually work with tolerances is the secret of LEGO, right? When you talk about the building system. So from that perspective, I started in the injection molding. I worked myself into process development. I actually took my MBA in LEGO, where I started to work with innovation of, like process development and innovation with new materials and new processes, and try to figure out, like, how can we actually be a better addition to the product development in generally. So I helped them quite a bit. A small thing is that if you think about it, you want a gold brick or a silver brick or a bronze brick, so you can celebrate who's winning the Formula One, right? But you remember that LEGO is simulating the world around us. So they just build models of everything we know about, right? So if it's a race car, they build a model of the race car, but they're still like the winner, and they're still number 3, right, or number 2. So I actually helped, solve some of the things around how do you create like a brick that is looking like gold coming directly from the injection molding machine, if you use the right material and colors instead of a spray painting them, right? And that's a process.
Because then the spray paint will chip off too.
If it's not in the it doesn't really. They know how to do that nowadays.
Okay.
But it's always a problem, because you have to bring it out to another process, then bring it back again to actually get this golden color. So solving some of those problems, and also remember that plastic comes from oil. Oil is considered fossil, and fossil fuels are contributing to the CO2, right? So the balance of CO2 is not totally positive if you use raw materials in that way. The good thing is that you don't burn it off in a process, right? You actually play with it, and then you hand it down to your children. So in that case, it's kind of like a better life cycle when it comes to a CO2 and the net zero balance. But nevertheless, it comes from fossil fuel. So if you can replace the material with something more sustainable, it'll be great. So we did all kind of process development with, grinding old, furnitures from plastic, and we put like 50% reclaimed wood into it. Wow. So all the things that you can mention, we tried it, and the other part was that we tried to use enzymes and other things to actually go into the brick. So do those kind of process development, and also simplify the whole production, because before you know it, the production get complicated. They always do. There's more products, there's more variants, and that's where the manufacturing philosophy is important, that you try to keep it simple.
So did they assign you a lot of these problems that they wanted you to work on, help solving, or was it more like a team discussion? Then how did that progress internally?
Well, it progressed with some kind of like natural development, where first of all, I had the desire to learn how to do injection molding. I expanded my scope of having more people. Then I worked with the new product introduction where we actually made the new bricks, and then I started with some process development at the same time, because then we put the first prototype production and first batch production and everything else. So, and then I worked myself towards the product development. And when I then wanted to do an MBA, I did it in management of technology and innovation. So that basically helped me frame the what we call the product development lab for process development. And that's really where the innovation lab were born, was through my MBA study. So I took the first MBA based on a project.
So you helped create the innovation lab within LEGO.
Yeah, the innovation hub.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that was where I said I get my first MBA. Later, when I took a task in Hungary, I got my second MBA, because that was out there doing the job on your own. It's out where no one really want to go. So it's in Nyíregyháza, which is close to the Ukraine border. So just getting anybody out there to visit you is difficult. It's difficult by its nature. So naturally, people want to get there, but you have to figure everything out yourself, including like, what policies do you have for the employees and everything else. So that was my second, and then later I took the job in Mexico. I was not really.
Well, let's.
Yeah.
So how many years were you working for LEGO in Denmark?
Well, I was working in. I was 7 years out. So I was there for 14 years. I started 7 years in LEGO in Denmark, and then I had like 4 years in Hungary, and then 3 years in Mexico.
And so when they came to you and asked you to move to Hungary, most people didn't want to go there. What was the need for the geographic location? Like, why was it important?
It was important because we outsourced the entire manufacturing to Flextronic. And when we outsourced it, we found out that it was actually done for moving production from high-cost countries to more affordable, like labor rates and everything else. So we utilized like a better production environment in those locations where Flextronic had their footprint, because they're actually good at that. LEGO was in more the you can say developed countries where you have like high salaries and high wages and everything else. So we try to use some of the production to actually be produced on those more optimized locations, and for that reason we worked with them for 4 years, but it didn't work out. So we insourced it again, and when we insourced it,
really?
I was asked to go there and fix the Hungarian site, and that was the preschool products, because it really went really south. It didn't work at all.
So you guys outsourcing it because of quality control and management was a huge issue. So you guys and when you insourced it, you decided to bring it back in house and manufacture it in Hungary because of labor costs, and they asked you to go fix it and make it run correctly.
It was not profitable. We lost 50%, more than 50% of the volume, because the Flextronic company couldn't really manage the material flow. So everything like went really bad. It was not really their normal business, because they were into Xboxes and everything else, and they were different by nature. So the whole thing was around that the Hungarian site, it was all the KPIs was kind of like red, so nothing really worked. So I had to go and I wanted to, together with the management, go and fix it. So that was my real first general manager job, where I was the one signing the bills, right? I was the one signing
everything.
The annual tax return, and if you didn't do it right, you can get to jail, right? So you have to go in. That's where the risks are.
So what was it that made you take that position, knowing that one, it's in Hungary? And I think that when we talked about it before, you had to travel back and forth. Like your family stayed in Denmark for a while. Yeah,
they stayed in Denmark for the first year, because our daughter, we are Protestant. So the background is that you confirmed your children in the church when they're 14 years old. So she was 13 and went into that age, and we wanted to make sure that she got that confirmation before we left Denmark. So that was actually the reason for the family to stay back. And then I was traveling the first year. And one of the things that have been true for me when I get out on the first job is that they don't see me the first 6 months, simply because I want to do the job and make sure that I understand everything.
So you spent 6 months to analyze everything that was going on,
yes,
manufacturing, figure out what all the flaws and issues were, and then work on repairing it, getting production to where it needed to be. What did that process look like for your first big management job? I mean, did you have any sense of? I mean, we talked about earlier about acting in faith, but when you take over a role like that, like you said, and you have to sign, and you can go to jail if you do it wrong. Were you nervous at all? How did you?
Of course, I'm nervous, but the only thing were taught by my mother is that you can always like raise and then continue, right? So what it is that even though it's hard, and one of the examples is because I wanted to get experience in other, you can say, like cultures and other positions that was not in the safe place in Denmark where everything is like, school is for free, universities are for free, and you have free medical. Everything is paid by the tax, right? So you have like a very strong safety net in Denmark. Naturally, you have to perform, but that was apparently not a problem, at least in the career that I had so far. So what happens is that I got this opportunity in Hungary. You go down, you spend a week, and my boss was basically saying to me, okay, so you're going to take this job or what? And now he just said like I should travel with him and check it out. And I said, yeah, I think I would. So yes, let's sign the paper. So I had to go home and tell my wife that I actually signed up for us to move to Hungary. So that's kind of like
that's not always the easiest conversation to have.
That's actually I'm not totally proud of it, but I knew that it was actually good for her and the kids to learn more about how the world really works and how things are looking like outside the
global experience. Yeah.
So get some global experience. So I said yes to it because I wanted to experience another culture, be like in a place where you have to figure everything out yourself, and actually be in a place where you have to learn how to swim, right? And that's some of the things that has followed me. And every time I change my job, it's because everything gets too organized, it gets too smooth, it gets too everything. And then I find myself walking around saying, what should I do today?
You fixed all the problems.
Well, I just like to fix things, really. And I think that's one of the traits that typically I have been used for, is that if there is quite a crisis situation of some sort, I've been sent out to help fix that fast, because apparently I have a good way to go in and find out where's the bottlenecks, where's the constraints, who is it that is blocking you, who's actually helping you. And I have a good read of that quite early in the process.
Do you think that's part of your identity, like you're designed to be a fixer and fix things?
At least I want to fix things. And I want to fix things so badly that, from time to time when my wife and I are speaking about things, there's things you can't fix. Like if somebody are ill, it's like, I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not fix that, but I want to fix it anyway. So that's where you get into those weird situations where you get like a good discussion out of things. But yes, I'm definitely like a person that wants to find a problem and really like correct the problem or fix it, right?
So you obviously succeeded at the Hungary job. Yeah. So the family stayed for a year back in Denmark. Yeah. Then they moved, and you were there for roughly 4.5 years.
Yes.
So what did you do to turn that around and make it successful?
Well, it's all about trust. So think about it, that you have a leadership team that knows what to do, but they don't trust you. They don't know who you are. So you need to lead in and find out what it is that they want. What is it that that is important for them, and really put your big. That's why you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Just listen more than you speak, right? So from that perspective, just sit down, have like some serious conversations about what is your career aspirations, what do you really want to do in life, what is it that is important for you and your family, do you want to stay here for a long time, do you have other family members here that you want to take care of, all those things, and then be flexible. When you are flexible, you can gain much more out of anyone, because they will give you the flexibility back. So again, like if somebody have if they have a child that needs attention and they have to go home 4:00 in every afternoon and spend like an hour and then do some job in the evening, it doesn't matter, right? You can still do that. So if you help with the flexibility and show that this is like another family style of work, then you can gain a lot of trust and respect.
How long do you think it took you to gain the trust and respect of the team there in Hungary?
In Hungary, it took long. And the reason for that is that I had to decode the culture. The thing is, you have to remember that in Hungary, they came out of some of the communisms, right? So one thing I found out later by really going so deep within, some of the problems that HR were sharing with me were basically around that you don't applaud things, like you don't clap, because in the old days there were like some general managers, and no matter how much wrong they were, everybody had to clap, and that's not working. So I was just like, yeah, let's celebrate and applaud things and clap and everything else, but
people are not
like it just didn't work. So the HR and told me later, and I said like, so what is wrong with all this? Why is people so silent? Well, first day, you are paid to take the decision, so you should speak. The other part is that don't do the clapping because it doesn't work. And then third of it is like, remember that a simple thing like getting a car or getting like an allocation for a house or something is not easy in the past. So you order a car, 5 years later you'll get it. You'll get the wrong one in the wrong color. And then what happens then later was that because like Flextronics trying to optimize their systems, they probably gave them some used cars from Germany that had a lot of miles on them, and they still didn't get what they desired. So the day I was said like, listen, I want to do something for you. I really want to work with you, and I want to do what's right for you. I actually ordered brand new company cars for them.
Wow.
So all of them got like a new company car that was decent for their position and everything else. And from that day, they could see that I actually meant it. And from that day, all the KPIs went up.
That's awesome. So essentially, yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you just essentially figured out what the issues were, adapted the culture first, clarify what the pain points were essentially for management, and what had not been done correctly, which is mainly the vehicles and like not being given what they were promised. So there was a trust issue, and then you repaired the trust issue by actually delivering and like getting it done and providing them what they're supposed to have.
And you have to think about to have empathy for the people who work with. So I can just give you another example where you have as a leader to think about when you want to stand up for your crew and for your leadership and protect them and be the guardian for them. And I think it's important that you remember that as a leader. And I've seen it a lot of times where if you really speak up for your team, you'll get another trust back that is tenfold. So in this case, we had like the Christmas present was coming along. Every year in Denmark, it's very common that you give the whole company like a Christmas present. And the headquarters have found out that everybody should get a present, and they were deciding it was secret. And I said to call the department in the gift giving department and ask them, so what is the gift? Because I wanted to know. And they said, we can't tell you because you're not clear to say, come on, I'm a general manager that takes risk of the company to sign the tax bill, and I can go to jail, and you cannot tell me what gift the employees are getting. So you don't trust me, I'm not telling them. Yeah, but we have sometimes, and everybody knows what they're getting, and then it's not a surprise. And I said, well, I want to have a good surprise, not a bad surprise.
Correct.
So I actually asked what it was. It was a big traveling suitcase. And when I found out, I said, like, are you out of your mind?
Most employees probably don't even travel very much, right?
Exactly. That's the point.
So it's not even a good gift for
So
them.
no one had been thinking about that those people that was working on the factory floor do never travel because they don't afford it. So what they were really trying to look for was to find out, like, how can they get, like, something for a good meal with their family. So I said, like, you can take your suitcases, and if they come to the factory, I'll return them. But you can send me the money, and then I'll make like a local team, and I'll work with them, and we'll find what's right for the employees.
Much
and
better.
I will put like employees in the committee to decide what the present is. Everybody went home with 2 or 3 bags full of stuff. One of them was a special smoked sausage that were only given to special occasions in Hungary, and they're very expensive. But in that gift, we could afford to give it to them. And they were so proud to cut this off for their family, and they actually had that to serve. It was so much better. And the only thing you just did really was just have a little bit of empathy of the situation you're in, listen to what people really want, and then involve them in what it is that they could actually bring home for their family. Because everyone wants to bring something home for their family.
Did you like your gut instinct when you called? Someone told you the gifts the years prior had been crappy? Or did you just have an instinct like, I need to check on this?
I just had a feeling that sometimes the headquarters is the headquarters. So they're from time to time far away, or they live in I don't think they make any bad meaning of anything. They're just far away. So what is in their nearby environment, which is the headquarters, they can travel everywhere. They go 2 times every year. There's 4 weeks of vacation in summer and 2 weeks in whatever, right? Winter. You have those kind of, because Denmark is a good place to work when it comes to how many hours and how much free you have or holidays you have. So from that perspective, it's interesting that it works in the headquarters in Denmark, but it doesn't work in Hungary and Czech Republic and Mexico and everything else, right? So that's where you have to be mindful about what are you actually working with, and who are you working with, and what is actually the situation that they have at home, right? Because otherwise you'll never be able to understand how they're thinking.
That's amazing. So when you took over the Hungary plant, you built trust and loyalty, got a feel for. So you really were a great manager. Not only I knew you were great at systems and engineering and design and processes and like production flow, but you did a great job of managing the people there, building their loyalty, and then making sure you protected them and gave them like corporate gifts that were in line with what they would actually want. I mean, that's amazing.
I'm trying my best as a leader to use my senses, understand how the situation is around you, and don't take things for given. If you're in doubt, then you should ask, and if there's something you really want, then you have to say, I want this, and be clear about it, because otherwise they're not able to navigate.
That's amazing. So once you had that track record of managing the Hungary plant, you also stuck your neck on the line for your people too, and said, don't send them the gifts, I'll send them back. Like we're gonna take this in house and handle it ourselves. That's pretty gutsy too. How did you end up moving from Hungary to Mexico? I know you mentioned earlier that once things get smooth and you fix the problems, you eventually move on.
First of all, they were still not smooth in Hungary. They were much better. So we had the whole factory, the production, the logistics, everything was working as a clockwork, right? The managers had like great talented team. They've hired some people that they could trust. Everything was working. We had probably the best KPIs in the group. So from that perspective, it was working quite smoothly. At the same time, I started to lay the groundwork for a new factory, because we wanted to move out to a better setting and double some of the production capacity.
That was in Hungary?
That was in Hungary. So we bought like a big piece of land and started actually an industrial park where we wanted to get a part of the land and then maybe invite some of the suppliers to locate next to us. So that was actually the plan, or later. To
make supply chain more efficient. That way they're all right there close by.
And also make sure that you actually had like a good footprint where your factory was sustainable and reliable, and you can trust that people are working in good conditions. You have great cafes for the employees. You have good like climate that you can work in, like for instance air conditions and other means and you can say good things that you could do for the employees, right? So you have to treat everyone with respect and treat them well, and make sure that they're not working in 100 degrees when you work in 70 inside the office. That's not how it works, right? You have to make some good conditions for everyone. So what happens were we started all this and we were building the foundation, and then again my boss called me and said like, I need you in Mexico. And I said, why do you need me in Mexico? And he was saying that I cannot declare every reason for me to go to Mexico, but some of it was there was actually some compliance issues. So I had to go and help the
compliance
management team.
Issues
meaning compliance. You have to envision yourself like there could be some financial issues in the company that was not all good for compliances, from a compliance perspective. So what I'm saying is that there were somewhere in the management team that you're not playing fair with the company's money. So anyway, I was asked to attend to this situation, and I was saying that, but I'm in Hungary, I'm building a factory, why do you need me? And I said, well, I would like to help where you need me to go, and I'll never doubt that, right? But if you can find another one, then do that. But he came back and said, like, I really want you to go, and I think you can go out.
So you told him to try to find someone else to go to Mexico.
I told him that if you can find somebody else, then you should try that. But if you really want my help, I'll go and help, right? Later on, I found out I was the only one that was apparently, you can say, risk-willing to go to Mexico.
Nobody else wanted to go.
And no one else basically wanted to touch it. So because I'm always want to help, and I think I can figure things out and read the situation. At that time, Mexico is a great place to be. There was some few problems with the cartels at that time, so you had to navigate and fly under the radar. But if you did that, I think it was manageable to stay there and be there. So I went and helped.
How did the family feel about moving after you'd already moved?
They really loved. They loved the They lived in Budapest, so it was an international community. We were in the British school systems with the kids. They learned a lot of language and were really taken care of. So they were happy there. So they didn't really want to move, but they trusted me that was the right thing to do. So we ended up accepting that we should go and try this out. So that's what we did, right? And they started an American school system in Monterrey, Mexico. So anyway, I went there. I found some of the leaks, if you will, in the company. And
so talking about that transition, so obviously going to Hungary, you have a culture there that you have to adapt to. You have to learn and understand the people.
Yeah, and it's still a European-ish culture, right? So you're in Europe still.
So there's still some similarities. Yeah. But Mexico, like it sounds like there's probably some waste and inefficiencies in cash, that's not being accounted for. So people are going to be much more guarded. Like, how is that transition coming into Mexican plant?
Well, so first of all, relations are important in the whole world, but relations in Mexico are more important, and that's where they have the whole class system is based on relations. Monterrey is 12 big families that bought a lot of land. They developed the whole city.
Only 12?
Only 12 families.
Wow.
That own all the land, and they started to separate the whole city into different. So they basically maintain a relations with, like some different family names. So the first thing you hear in Mexico when you speak in Monterrey is, what is your last name? And that's because then you kind of like level your respect.
And you know which family they're from.
And every time, our children were hanging out with somebody, anybody like I had a business relations with will ask, what is their family name?
Well, you guys obviously don't fit in. I mean,
we don't fit in because we don't have a family name. Yeah. But nevertheless, they tried to kind of like protect, that some of the more resourceful people do business together, right? And that's where you have to be careful because it's a very finite system. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of there could be a lot of favors coming into that system. So for that perspective, you still need to get your 3 quotes. You still need to go out and make sure that you optimize everything for the company. And because I'm a trustworthy person, I want to do things right. I never compromise to do things correctly for the business of a company because that's how I grew up. Then they knew they could put me in and make sure that all the processes, the tools that we're using, the staff that we hired and promoted were in line with the values of the company as well as the ethical value of how to do business. Because you have to be very careful in some of those. It's not only a Mexican thing, it's everywhere in the world. You have a lot of cash. So the more cash you have, the more you have to be careful.
So how was it for the family then? Like, and you also like integrating into that culture where there's 12 major families, you don't fit into any of those family last names. Like, what did that dynamic look like? Were you able to build respect within the community and like connections, or was it difficult? Like,
it's difficult. So at first we thought that we'll get like some relations during the school, and we started to be the very few that actually lived in Monterrey. We were there, so our family was probably counted as 2 or 3 different nationalities. So we were Danish, Hungarian, and also probably from the States. So they could actually count us 3 times because they said there was 2% foreign students in their school. I think there's 0.5%. And we were probably 1 out of 10 families. So everyone was from Mexico, which is not a problem, but it gives you a concentration where it's difficult to. But we were from Denmark. We're not from the U.S. So the thing were that they started to, be interested in. There's always like some people in Mexico that's interested in. So they are from Europe, what's that about, and started to talk with us. So we had like some few families that we started to communicate with. And later on, I thought about, after 7-8 months, I was thinking, what should I do to actually open up the business environment? So I started to invite, through those people that I kind of like started to know from school, I started to invite some of their circles into the manufacturing footprint. And they actually saw what we're doing in LEGO, and what they actually.
So they own businesses that you potentially could integrate or hire or bring into the.
Well, whatever I needed to get help from, right? There is like some of the network new construction companies that you could trust. They knew what quality they were making. We still went out and did a tough process about,
Sure.
this is the scope, this is the spec, this is the price, and then vetted that through the procurement system and everything else. So we followed everything that was correct to do from a business perspective. But they could actually point out the ones that you have to be careful about, right? You have to. We wanted, but at a certain time, I wanted to buy land next to the factory, so I have to think about how do I do that and who is owning what and what are their perspective of things. So I started to be host for a lot of factory tours, not only for business but actually also from schools. So I bought
because the kids probably loved it, right?
Yeah, because the kids loved it, right? So I bought like a small train that we can drive schools around between the factories, and they could get a train ride, and that was really like neat because everybody in the surrounding knew who we were, that we were a good company. We wanted to do things for the community. Every Christmas we took some of the boxes that was not selling well, or there was a new you can say like product coming out the year after, and then we went out to some of the poor communities and donated that for Christmas.
Oh, that's amazing.
And we did it ourselves. So I put it in my truck and I drove out and we did it to the people. We gave it to the military is doing a great job in Mexico to keep law and order. So all their family lives inside the walls, and they're not able to come out because they're exposed every time, because everybody wants to get to your family if there's some problems in the criminal world, right? So they live inside. So we also went out to the military bases and helped them celebrate and be playful, because everybody have the right to play.
Sure.
And that was really what this was about. So anyway, we got into this business environment. We invited a lot of people to come in. We showed them the factory. Everybody, left the company extremely impressed, because we had like air conditioning for all the employees. We had free meals because that was probably the only meal they got during the day. And then we basically made sure that during summer times we tried to make some summer camps for the kids and everything else that was living at home, because it was a tough time for many families that was living in Mexico and earning that money that they earned in the factory. So we tried to do more. We had like 70 bus routes where we brought people in, paid for their transportation, and but the factory was really neat. And
how many people worked in that factory?
I think we were 6,500.
Okay,
people at the time. Yeah, and that's a lot because there is some celebration where you actually celebrate and dance, and you have the mariachis where they play music. So I actually danced with a lot of the factory workers
awesome.
During some of those times, because you need to bring some fun into your production, right?
Well, it fits with your company culture too. I mean, to bring the kids through, the idea to put a train and like do tours, it's smart because you're not only targeting the children and like it fits with the brand demographic, but then also building the right connections among the parents and probably trust from the parents as well, where you guys were outsiders culturally before. That was very smart.
So the other thing you have to remember is that 25% of all profit in LEGO goes to charity.
Wow.
So that's
huge.
I brought like Mexico on the map of charity within the charity organization. So they had like Africa. I think they also like helped China, and then we got Mexico on the map as well, because they really need some help of education. And you can actually use Lego bricks for education to places where they don't know really how to reach kids that have difficulties, writing letters or reading, or you can use Lego to help build their skills from a 3D perspective, so they actually understand more by building bricks, right?
So talk to me then about because the people element and the cultural element is very interesting, but you also had to fix the operations of the plant and the profitability and figure out what the financial issues were and where the money was going. And I assume there were cultural roadblocks. What did that process look like? Well,
naturally, you do a lot of investigation, interviews, trying to find out what's going on, and people always talk. They always talk. So you find out where things are coming from, where the sources are. You link with people outside. You get like a network that actually that you understand what's going on, and then you put like some better security in place, and then you can find out what's really wrong, and then you just find some of those people that is unfortunate and getting into trouble by themselves, and then you just honestly have to fire them, because otherwise you cannot accept those things are going on, because if you accept it, it's kind of like the culture, right?
Sure.
So there is like
how many people did you end up having to fire? Do you remember?
It was both management and there was like some group of people that was in different positions that was critical for the company. So it's probably 15 to 16 people.
How long did it take you to figure out and identify them and let them go?
I think it took like probably a month.
That's fast.
Well, I don't know whether it should be faster, but you need to be sure when you do those.
Sure.
Things, because you cannot make it wrong, right? And the people that I was really in doubt about, I sat down and talked to them, really candid, and
in person, face to face.
Told them like that I've been investigating, and this was in this spirit of correcting the culture. I believe that you're doing right, and if I find out that it's not the truth, then you know what's happen, right? So just don't step next to the straight line.
That's wild. So how long did it take you to turn the plant around then, and to actually get it profitable or upsized or correct the issues?
I think the factory was actually quite okay from a perspective of operating and everything. So the system was not too bad. So it was not like lifting like I did in Hungary, but it was to gain the trust in the leadership back, because you're going in and make like some surgery. You remove some parts, and now the whole ecosystem is not working the way that it did before.
Then did you replace those parts too? You did the hiring for people culturally.
Then you find some important talents that you want to hire for different positions. You even bring in expats for positions that you cannot compromise. Like if it could be a lawyer or somebody sitting in accountant or in procurement, or places where you're exposed for things that could go wrong, right? So you just make sure that you actually have control of those things, and then hire the best talent you can trust through some interviews, and make sure that you're starting and refreshing the whole system.
That's amazing.
But it takes time to get the trust back, and that's the similar thing that happened in Hungary was you have to earn the trust. You cannot just say I have to trust tomorrow. So once you earn it and you find the right people and you find the right way to actually replace the people that is not doing right for the company, then you can start to build the trust. And that comes through community. It comes through again, empathy. It comes to be authentic, and it comes to be having a positive and high level of integrity, right?
That's awesome. So talk to me about the expansion there. I think that once you got the factory and the culture repaired, fixed a year in, eventually you decided that you thought it was the right move for the company to expand. But I feel like people also were hesitant to do so, and you essentially staked your reputation on the fact that they needed to do it. Talk to me about that and how that took place. And
so first of all, the business case between producing in Mexico and selling in the US is something that a lot of companies have been using for a long time. So it really works. So the highest level of profitability for the company was actually exactly that balance between Mexico and US. So manufacturing and doing all your production in Mexico, and then ship it into distribution centers in the US and get it out to all the channels, like the brand stores, the Walmarts, the toy stores, everything. It's a very profitable way to do your business. So for that reason, you should actually do more of it. And there was an untapped demand that we wanted to tap into. And that's where I started to talk about we should probably do more manufacturing in Mexico and expand the company.
How did you know there was untapped demand?
Because I could see that in the sales and operation planning that we from time to time have difficulties meeting the expectations of the sales plans. But that was in pockets, right? And those pockets got more and more frequent. So I could see that we probably could have been producing up to 20-30% more. And when you can see that, then you absolutely know that there's probably 50% out there that you're not tapping into, right?
Wow, that's a huge increase from a revenue perspective, profitability perspective, all of it. Those are monster.
So there's no way that you should not do it, right? So,
100%.
So from that perspective, I said you have this plan that you look 10 years ahead for land. You probably look 5 years ahead for a factory, and you put for tools and processes, you probably look 3 years ahead, right? So that means that you have to make a decision about in 3 years, we need this amount of injection molds and this amount of packaging machines and decoration machines and everything. And then you need a factory 5 years out in the future, and you need 10 years, then you need the land, right? So I said, I think we have to start to buy land right now. So I wanted to expand, so we had the land, because land, the thing is about land is that it's never depreciating, it's appreciating, right?
It's true.
So it means that the value always goes up. And there's no way you can go wrong in the world about buying land. The thing that you can go wrong about if you don't have the cash and you have to loan them for a high interest, then you should not do it. But if you have the cash, you should go out and buy land. There's always not a downside with it. So what happens is that I made the business case for it. I said there is an untapped demand. I agreed with the head of U.S. sales. So we were production and sales that worked together for the Americas region, and we agreed upon it was a good time to actually do something about it. So we went in with a pitch to the whole management team, which we were a part of ourselves. So we brought it in and said, like, we want to do this. And then we started to do the procurement of the land, which is not that easy in Mexico because there's a lot of interest about what is the price of the land, who's owning it, do you really buy it, what about permit afterwards, and all this stuff, right? So you have to think it through. So, and I was also getting into some trouble about that already.
Let's talk about that. I want to hear the story. Yeah, I want to hear the story.
Well, the thing was that you have to be smart about buying a piece of land. Otherwise, if you come and say, we're LEGO, we want to buy your land, what would you do?
Jack the price up.
You'll just jack the price up.
Yeah, it's human nature.
So first of all, you need to find an agent that could, on your behalf, find a piece of land, go and negotiate. But you also probably want to make some decoys. And that means that you ask several pieces of land. So now no one really knows which one you want to buy. So what I did was that I made a spread of 3 really potential pieces of land that we can buy that was in the nearby, and we could expand the factory. One of them were next door. And when we actually came to the negotiation, this person of naturally was saying that, yeah, there is this issue, and he was about to sign the contract. Him and I met because we should sign the contract.
And this is the piece of land that you truly wanted because it was the one that was directly adjacent to the property. But you had other potential options.
So he came. We wanted to sign. So what happens is that he said, well... And
the agent had already pre-negotiated prices and terms that he had agreed to.
Yeah, and then we walk in and he sees LEGO, right? And they said, well, the thing is that I have another offer and I actually can get more for the land. And
From who?
Yeah, but that's always the thing. You're in real estate yourself. It's a trick you can always play, right? Sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not true. In this case, I called the bluff, right? So I just said, you don't have any buyers. And you don't have you have not any buyers for the money that we had negotiated. So the thing is that I said, listen, if you don't want to do the deal, I think it's okay. We'll just like put the pen on the table and I'll walk out. And he watched me, and I walked out the door, and he came out and tried to catch me and get me back to sign because he knew that we had 2 other pieces of land. Because I said, like, we have 2 other negotiations going on. We'll just go back to those and see whether we can close them instead. So I had the leverage, right? It's all about having the leverage
and planning it through ahead of time. Yeah,
and planning it through, and therefore we got the land and in the price we wanted to pay for it. But it's one of those moments where you said, like, I really want this land.
It's preparation. You have to prepare ahead of time, knowing that situations could arise.
Be very tactical in a moment like that, and then stick to your plans.
That's amazing. So you ended up getting the land, got the land at the price you guys wanted it for expansion.
Yeah.
So what did the rest of that career journey look like while you were there at LEGO before Tesla came hunting you?
Well, the rest of my career was that we eventually... got the building permits. Let's
talk about I forgot about the building permits.
Well, the next challenge is that there's a lot of requests in Mexico, and one of them is that you can get things done fast if you pay more. And naturally, I don't want to pay more for services you don't get.
Sure.
So there was some request for a large amount of cash that we should pay for getting the building permit through the system faster. So nevertheless, I could naturally not do any of the requests of facilitating a faster building permit. So I had to think out of the box, right? Luckily, I've been showing...
For sure, especially because there's pressure. Like, you convinced the company to buy the land. You guys have shelled out the cash. You now own the land. Yeah. And now you can't get the building permit after spending money designing the property to develop it. And you got to... Yeah, that's a big roadblock.
But it's also a problem that I can fix. Well, it was a very interesting period of my work because... You get into this kind of like, okay, what now? How can you actually solve this? So I was thinking, like, well, maybe I can use some of the friends or not the friends, but the business partners that I actually invited for, you can say the factory, to see the factory and how it works and be a part of the ecosystem of the entire, you can say, companies that is out in this area that we operated. and also like some other friends from the school. I knew them as well. So I started to ask, what are you actually going to do in a situation like this? And naturally, as you can imagine, some of them say, just pay it, move on, that's it. And others said like, I actually don't know, I have to think about it. And then there's some few people that said, let me just come back, I might have an idea. And then before you know it, which I've been thinking that direction as well, you need to have somebody like, it's kind of like you have to go to the boss of the boss to get things done, right? And who's the boss of the municipality is maybe the kind of like the state. After the state, you maybe have the president, right?
President of Mexico.
So anyway, we ended up by inviting the president, Peña Nieto, to come and announce the whole celebration of the expansion of the investment that we're going to do in Mexico. I talked to all the legal people, I talked to everybody in headquarters, and we actually decided that was the way that we were going to do it.
It's brilliant.
So what happens is that you come with the whole military is screening your factory for threats for the president, and then the president comes in and he do the speech. But before he's doing the speech, I had like 2 minutes with him to show him the factory, and I said, this is how we want to do it. Here's all the drawings. We just have a small problem. And that is that we don't have building permit for it yet, because it takes like 3 years to get it. And he said, no, it doesn't. I said, well, this is what the mayor is saying. And he said, like, you'll have the building permit tonight. And he announced it. And now he announced it. Not me. He announced it.
From the top.
From the top. And he announced the date of where we are going to be operational, how much money we were spending on it, how many jobs it was. And certainly next day we had the building permit.
That's incredible.
And I didn't pay any
no bribes. That is one of the cool stories.
Like I didn't facilitate any like faster, building permits or anything else. I just tried to say that we wanted to do this investment and we were serious about it, and we wanted to do good for the community, right? So in the end, it works out, but you have to be creative, and naturally working in LEGO, it is about creativity. So
I think it's amazing that like the network you built, building the culture in the community, ended up being the access you needed, and you gave the credit away too. Like you guys are now giving the credit to the current president. So I mean, that's great for him. It's a no-brainer. He wants to take credit for expansion, Absolutely. All the monetary investment, the good that's gonna be done for the community by adding all those jobs. I mean, that was
and the company
smart.
A company stands for something very good. It's to make sure that all the kids in the world have the right to play. They actually get play material, and they expand their logical and creative brain, which is something that is good for intelligence, right? So I can't say anything really bad about that brand or the products that they're doing, because everybody it's very familiar with building products or building Lego when they were young, right?
All kids love Legos, man. That's a good point. It's a very positive brand and product, and it's beneficial for all kids around the world.
Yeah.
Development. That's amazing. That's a great story. I'm like, that's a really cool story.
Thank you.
So you ended up you got the build permits, the plant's getting built.
Yep. And
again, you're just similar to Hungary. You're at the end phase of fixing all the problems and getting the expansion done. So talk to me about like what happens next.
Yeah. Then in 2015, I get this call from a recruiter that was looking for a new vice president for this company called Tesla. And I was just looking, I said, what is Tesla?
You didn't know what Tesla
I know what Tesla is from a scientific perspective, but what is like the company Tesla? So I had to look it up and try to find out what it was. And then I started to understand, like, because one thing that I always been passionate about is, again, like technology, mechanics, and also living a better sustainable world, right? So from that perspective, I worked with trying to replace the fossil fuels in bricks to be more net zero, and we actually work quite a bit about energy consumption, everything else in the factory. The company offset every electricity it's using by wind turbines. So there's a lot of good stuff about the company about this sustainability, and I really like that part, to be working in a sustainable company. So when Tesla came along and I started to read about that they were making electrical cars, they could charge it with renewable energy, you can drive without the fossil fuel, you can stop the global heating. I was just thinking, man, that's such a good mission. I need to figure out what that is about, right? So anyway, what happens were that the recruiter talked to me and said, like, okay, we wanted to speak with you. And I said, fine, then you have to come to me.
I think it's so funny. It's not even that long ago, but you had no idea who the company Tesla was, and now they're like one of the greatest companies in the world, which is wild.
They're definitely like a large company now that grew from a very innovative small company to become like world known, right? So anyway, so what happens is I told that they could come and interview me and spend a day in the factory and see what this was about, and if they like the way that I operated, they could hire me, and if they don't, then don't hire me. Then we at least learn something from each other. So the co-founder JP Straubel, Kevin Kassegert, who was in construction, that was starting some of the work around the Gigafactory, and as the director of HR, flew down, spent a day with me, met the whole leadership team. They talked about everything. Naturally, they didn't know what was going on. I just said like we were benchmarking with this company and everything worked out. So what happens is that they wanted to invite me to US to meet Elon, and I said, of course I want to meet Elon. So, but before I did, I said,
had you done research on him at that point, because you didn't even know who Tesla was when they called you?
I did. I always do my research, so I never come unprepared to anything. So that's one of the things you should also know about me. I really try to do my homework. I cannot know everything in the world. My brain is not big enough for that, right? But the thing is that I would always prepare to understand what it is. So I understood what product they had, what things they were doing, how they were in the process, who was the founder, and who was Elon, and what had been doing with PayPal. So I studied all that, right? So, but I never knew who he was, like as a person and as a leader, as a risk taker, right? So from that perspective, I walked into the meeting and interviewed with him, and I was just like, it was interesting the way that I came into Palo Alto, and we're in the headquarters at that time, and I was prepared to meet Elon, and everybody was preparing me to meet Elon. I was just like, why is this all this preparing me to meet Elon kind of thing? That's weird. But anyway, they prepared me, and
what does that look like? What's the preparation?
The preparation is like, don't say anything you don't want to say. Like, be mindful that he will sniff out the bullshit. So if you're faking it until you make it, it's not working for you. So he was just like a person that you should be prepared to meet. So
transparent, straightforward,
because
brief.
He's straightforward, directly. He asks some questions, and he wants to know how you solve a problem, right? So I went into this interview, and normally I found out later that you are either in there for 15 minutes or 30 minutes. 15, you're out. 30 minutes, you probably have a chance. So I interviewed for 45 minutes. So apparently I had a good chance to actually get the job. So after I finished up the job, I got the offer.
Wow, that's awesome.
To build the Gigafactory. And I just told him, like, I was sitting with him and said, like, so I've been out there, I said to him, where nothing can be worse. So no matter what you put in front of me, I try to be places where it cannot be worse. I've seen, like, this is so bad that the only way that things can go is a better way. And, when you work in that environment, you have to build, like, resiliency, and also you want to make sure that you can actually find a way through it and see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? So I told him that I tried something in my life. I told the stories and the moments and everything else about where I stood up for myself, where I said no to things and where I said yes to things. And I think he likes it. And then I explained to him about the problem I've solved in the different companies. And I said, you can talk to JP Straubel about, he was spending a day with me. And if you don't like what he sees, then don't hire me. I'm here to help. I'm not here to do a career or anything.
Sure.
So he hired me, and I started the Gigafactory, and that's really where my career at LEGO started. After LEGO, I started at Tesla in 2015.
That's amazing.
And you
were pretty transparent with Elon in that meeting too, because I remember you mentioned that they gave you a car to drive for several days when you were in town.
Yes, because what happens is that before I met him, as a part of doing my research, I know the product is everything. So I asked him to drive one in the Model S that they were developing. So I drove it through the mountains and everything else, and he said, like, so thank you for driving the car. What do you think about it? And, most people say this is the most amazing thing. You've done a miracle and everything else. I told him that this is the best drive experience I ever experienced anywhere. The way that an electrical car is driving is truly something that surprises me positively. I would totally change my gasoline car to an electrical car for several reasons. The thing I would improve on the car was the noise of the drive units, is the cabin temperature, and because it was very hot from the roof, and the temperature was not able to be controlled easily, and then there was some oversteering that was basically when you turned it, you really have to to think about how you actually drove the car down in the mountains. And I was driving over the Sierra, so it was interesting. And that was at that time. I remember that was like it was a rainy day, so you have to take care of it. And I was driving it to the edge, right, because I wanted to figure out what this car could do. So I spoke to him about those things, and he totally agreed with me that was actually some of the problems that he was working with. So just knowing the products and trying the product and being in front of it, what the customers are experiencing, and he lived those principles himself. And I remember one time he was, approving a new car seat. It was one of those rough days because he basically said like some designer put a sofa seat into a racing car, so they should be fired immediately. So those kind of things were days where that was kind of rough day, but other times you learned a lot from him. And he had this thing about first principle, and I took that away with me as well. Like you have to do the simple things you can do and build it up from there. So, and also like things have dual purposes. Like a airplane wing is not only an airplane wing; it serve a purpose of being the fuel tank as well. So having those dual functions of things is important. And normally what we say is that you cannot put a box in a box in a box, and it happens all the time. So think about it like you put a battery cylinder, you put it into a module, you put it into an enclosure, and you put that enclosure into a car. So now you have enclosed batteries 4 times or something. And why would you do that? That's not first principle. First principle is you take the whole car and the scale, and you ask, why is it actually so heavy? And that actually helped me at Google later in my career, because I said to everyone, why don't you put a data center on a scale and find out why it's so heavy? Why does it weigh the weight it has, and what can we take out? Because first principle is about making everything as simple and light as you can, because everything else is waste.
And efficient, yeah.
Yeah. So if you can do one enclosure and glue it directly to the bottom of the car, then you have a tray, and actually the bottom of the car is the lid. Then you don't have to put a lid on the battery pack before you put it on the car. So now you have 2 lids. That's kind of cost that no one wants to pay for.
So what was it like culturally working at Tesla and then also working for Elon? What was that experience like?
Elon is very intense.
Because you were one of the top, like, very few executives when you got hired in.
I was a vice president for the Gigafactory, so I took care of the whole operations, and later I took the responsibility for the entire powertrain. So I had the process engineers, the maintenance, and also the manufacturing of powertrain. So and I like that because that was the drive units, the battery packs, and the stationary storage that was kind of like brought up to the power walls and the mega packs that is put in industrial settings. So we make all what we call the battery system, the powertrain system. So, and also we also produce some of the infotainment system at the start until it was produced by somebody else. So the early Model S, we actually made those ourselves, the screens and everything. So I took the responsibility for the powertrain in the L, and naturally some of those product launches, it was extremely hard. It was 7 days a week. It was like 24/7. He could show up at 5 o'clock in the morning. All the stuff, right? So from being, working all the time, it was wearing you out.
Sure.
And after 4 years,
because most people don't last there. Like, he burns through people pretty fast, from what I've heard.
Yeah. So the thing is that he, yes, he have high requirements for his vice presidents and directors and everyone that's in the leadership. And if you don't get what he wants, you are not a part of the team anymore. and that's fair game, right? It's what it is. So you have to work hard and be smart and make sure that you do your best you can. And the thing you can always look in your mirror is that, did I do the best I can? And I think some people can actually not say yes to that. But if you can say yes, what more can you do? Then just fire me. You've done everything you can. You can look yourself in the mirror. That's all you need. The rest is really about fantasies about what you can do that you're not able to, right? So I was always honest with him. I remember one time we had we were ramping up Model 3, and we had like a bottleneck in the manufacturing, and it was line 4, we called it. And that line 4, there was a lot of engineers that had been working nonstop for probably 3 days, sleeping in the cars, you name it. And he came up and we were behind schedule. And I was just like, this is going to be a long night. So I basically took him in a little detour. So we walked up the stairs, and I said, like, listen, Elon, those engineers have been working extremely hard. We're behind schedule. I'm responsible. If you fire somebody, you fire me. Don't fire the people up there that have been working like crazy for the last long time. The tolerances for the product and everything else, we have a problem, and I could show him the 2 bottlenecks that we had. And I said, like, if we move this robot faster, we will basically throw the modules off the robot because the vacuum could not keep it. And he looked at it and said, I don't believe you. And I said, that's fair. So what do you want us to do? Take the robots to 110%. So we turned it up to 110%. The module got kicked into the machine. It destroyed probably for a couple of $1 million because it was very finite equipment. and we had to take the module out into the dunk tank so it didn't go on fire, right? But we threw the module, I can tell you.
Was he standing there when it was thrown?
And he looked at me and said, "You're right." So I said, "Well, we'll fix it and move on, right?" And I was just like, if you don't.
Did he help solve the problems, the bottlenecks you guys had to get back on schedule? Or no?
What I also learned is the first principle. The other one is that you stay with the bottlenecks. Everything throughput is related to where's your bottleneck, and when you solve a bottleneck, you get a new bottleneck. So if you can simulate your whole production setup with all the PLCs and everything else, you can find the bottleneck. And when you solve the bottleneck, you get more throughput in the other end. So where is your bottleneck? And if you ask a factory director or an area manager and they can't answer, then you're out, right? Because you have to know where the bottlenecks is. You need to know your own business, and you should be on top of whatever problems you have with either the product itself, the process itself, the equipment itself. If you know those things, you'll get along with Elon. He's a fair person.
So how long were you at Tesla before Elon called you and asked you to go solve problems in Mexico?
Well, I was there for some time, and we ramped up the Gigafactory. We should have done to In the meanwhile, we launched the the fastest car ever, the P100D. So he invited me down to Fremont. So I was working on the P100D kind of production. We solved some. We produced like 30 cars a day, and we should produce 1,200 a day.
Whoa!
So there was meetings with Elon on a frequently basis, and let's just say that I probably need to wear ear protection because there were some loud conversations, which is fair game. We didn't deliver, right? So we had to figure that out. But the design was that you put like 1,000 more cells into the battery pack, and you have to fix the space problem. And from a manufacturing perspective, it was actually difficult. So anyway, we got there faster than I hoped for, so it was good. So we got up to 1,200, and we actually took a lot of the production people and reduced it because we got like so much control about this that we could take half of the people off the line and produce 1,500 instead of 1,200.
Wow, that's extremely efficient.
Yeah, so it was quite efficient, and we found all the floors and everything else. So, and sometimes it was very, very simple things. Like one day I was trying to find out a very complicated problem, and I was just, there's something else going on here. And then I went to the start of the line, and I started to observe the person and how they work and everything else. There was no one to replace the person that fills in the cell on the start of the line. So the problem was really that the person had to go to the bathroom or have a lunch break or something, and no one replaced him. So we staffed the line.
Wow.
That's sometimes so simple.
It was that simple to fix the issue.
Sometimes that's so simple that you just need to pay attention to that, right? And then we solved all the bottlenecks. But in the middle of all that, we got like a problem with Model S and Model X that the exterior light, there was a manufacturer in Mexico that could not follow production schedule. So 50% of the production from that plant was missing and throttled Model S and X, and that was the profitable cars at that time when we launched Model 3.
The S and X were the two profitable cars that were carrying the company revenue.
The secret plan were we produce an electrical car, then we produce a high-end car that pays for an affordable car. So the Model S and X should pay the bills for Model 3 launch. That was the whole plan all along, right?
Interesting.
So what happens is that when you limit the output of Model S and X because of the exterior light, you're in trouble.
You're in a financial trouble.
So JP Clausen called me and he said, like, I've discussed with Elon, and Elon wants you to go and help in Mexico because you have been working in Mexico before. I said, yes. If I can help you, I want to help you.
And the problem was that the light manufacturer that you guys were exporting, so that was actually outside of your actual direct control from Tesla.
It was in procurement, yeah. So
they were manufacturing lights for both those two vehicles, which are the most profitable vehicles, which carried the entire company.
And interesting enough, they were also producing for Ford, but that's another story.
Interesting. Okay.
So that was when some of the new Lincolns were launched. So they were actually sharing two different brands in the same company. So there was like this company had like 50% 50 different manufacturing sites that was producing exterior light for different car brands
around the world.
Exactly, and this company were in Mexico. It was in Monterrey, and
familiar area. Yeah.
So he said, like, you're familiar with this. Why don't you go down and fix it? I said, if I can help, I'd like to go down. So we flew down. We basically took over.
Didn't you give him terms before he agreed to take the job?
Yes, I did. So what happens is that before we actually went there, I said, like, I want to have the people that I appoint to go with me cannot say no, and the manager cannot say no either. And I have some selection criteria. So I found Spanish-speaking people, and also, like, they had the right mindset of figuring out where problems were, and they were in the front line doing things. I knew who they were because I know them from the manufacturing and engineering and all the product development setup. So I called out the best people I knew about, and naturally when they were called out to go with me, all the managers were hesitant saying anything because Elon was behind this, right? So we just flew down with
How big was the team?
I think it was around 26 to 32-ish.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, so it was a lot of people. So we just went in and honestly took over the factory. And naturally, the CEO was furious about it and wanted to sue us and everything else. And I said, just be careful who you're suing here, because it will probably come back tenfold. So what happens is that, and I said, like, as long as you don't deliver the plan, I don't think you have anything to say here. So let's go in and find out what the problems are instead of discussing whether we can come. We have 30 people here helping you. We want our headlights, and we're going to get our headlights, with or without you. It's up to you, right? So we want to do it with you. So let's try to figure that out first. So it was actually an interesting story because after I found out, again, where the bottleneck were, where the problems were, what kind of things should be solved with the design and
so paint the picture for when you guys fly down with a team of 30 from Tesla. This is a separate company you guys don't technically own, but you have a contract where they're supposed to provide you with certain production. They're providing 50% of what their contractual obligations are. I assume that was a somewhat hostile environment.
It was very hostile, and also remember that in Tesla's world, when you do those things, you don't have a choice. You're not entitled to ask questions. You're not entitled to actually manage your own company anymore because you screwed it up. I'm sorry, but that's the fact. So from that perspective, you just go in and do it. You don't ask the questions whether you're allowed to or whether the contract's telling you to. You have to do it. You don't have a choice. It's that's where Tesla is very different. It's always a matter of survival or not survival of the company, right?
Wow. So you guys essentially went down and said, look, we're here with the team to fix the issues and get production up.
Yep.
You asked them to work with you.
Yep.
Did they work with you or did they work against you?
They tried to work with us, but it was very difficult for them. But eventually they started to see that I wanted to help. So they were skeptical, very skeptical. But they started to see that I was working with some of the design within the headlights because 30% of the production were scrapped in the last process step to validate whether the lights were correct or not. That has something to do with the way that the lights were designed. So I asked the design team to fix this immediately. So we got some of the scrap rate fixed quite soon by having the designers.
They were wasting 30% of production.
Yep.
They were getting scrapped.
They just scrapped them. They produced everything. And then we had like an injection mold that was not working as it should. And then the material flow. So they didn't get the material for all the parts they needed because what is normal in Mexico, the way that you earn money, is that you outsource some of your services like material handling. The material handlers are then, contracted by a company. That company promised you to have 200 people, but they are probably never 200 people there. But they charge you 200 people. So when I started to count the material flow...
So they're making margin by understaffing the factory.
Exactly. And what happens is that you don't get your parts because you're actually supposed to be 200 people. I counted the people. That was not enough. Actually, there's only 60% of what you should be there. And I called them and said, like, where's the rest of the 40 people? 40% of the people, right? And we're talking a lot of people in a big factory with a lot of material flow, like forklift drivers and material picking and everything. So, and the reason for me to find out was that I spoke with all the operators and said, like, what is the problem that you have on the line? And again, be humble and trying to listen to the people that actually have the problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them, so what is the problem? Yeah, first of all, they do the changeover between Ford and Tesla all the time. So I managed to get like an extra production line.
Oh, they're swapping between Ford and Tesla
all the time. So I said like I want my own line. So we built like a prototype line in the matter of 1 week with all the people that was there, and then we started to actually produce Tesla on their own line. And I said to the CEO, don't worry about the money, we'll figure that out. Just go and invest in it, and then you'll get them. Either we'll pay it or someone will pay it. It doesn't matter. Just get the output, and trust me in this one, right? And they actually built the output, and they could see that I was right. And the other part is that I asked then the the operators that was sampling parts. They said like, well, we never have the materials. They're never showing up with our materials. And I went into the warehouse and I started to ask questions. And that's where I could see that, that's the old story about not staffing correctly compared to your contract.
Wow.
So I just said like to the company and they were contracting Volkswagen, and so it was a big material handling company that was doing a lot of companies in Mexico. And we basically took like staff and sent them from Puebla in Mexico up to Monterrey from the Volkswagen plant because they were cheating on the scale, right?
Wow. So you got them to pull employees and actually bring them to...
Yeah, because otherwise I would say like you will have like you'll basically be sued with everything, and we'll go back in time and figure out how much you owe us. And we're talking about finished cars now. So every single car that we lost will be because of you.
Wow.
And, when you start to say things like this, they will send the buses. Don't worry about it. So we had this material handling, we had this scrap, and we had from the injection mold, and then we had the design of the lamp that could be improved so we don't have the rejections. So we did all that, and I think the CEO could start to see it worked. I went out in the factory in 6 o'clock in the morning, and I went home at 11 o'clock in the evening. So he couldn't outpace me, and he was worried about that. So, and then I found out later that all the engineers, because it's kind of like 70 degrees in the office and it's 100 degrees in the factory.
Wow.
And that's where all the engineers, where do you think they are?
Sitting in the air-conditioned spaces.
They're definitely not in the factory. And that's where they should be. So I created a culture where I actually went into the office and say, why don't you come out and see it with me? And I was sweating like crazy in the factory because they were not giving the opportunity for the people. And even I could see the CEO was coming out and sweating with me because he was worried about what I asked the employees to do, right?
Sure.
So Ford heard about it. They came down as well. Naturally, they left after 3 days because they couldn't, I don't know, they just were not resilient enough to stay longer. So, and also I think they had some other problems with launching some of the cars, so I don't think they needed the headlights as much as we did. So they kind of like were kind of okay with the situation. I think that was the conclusion of it. But nevertheless, I solved that problem. So again, we got so many headlights in 90 days that the planning department asked me not to send more.
And you did it in how many days?
90 days.
3 months.
Yeah.
So that's amazing to me that you were able to go down there and essentially take like managerial control of a plant you guys technically didn't own.
Yeah.
And then identify all the problems and fix them.
Yeah. Well, it's what I'm good at, right? It's what I know I can do. So that's where I try to help where I can help and fix the problems where the problems are biggest and find, based on my experience, what can unlock the situation. And then instead
do you think that a part of that was the management team was the problem?
I think sometimes people are not doing things wholeheartedly, right? So they say that we have this problem, I'll ask you to work with it with the engineers. They don't really go out and be a part of the problem. So yes, it's partly it's part of the leadership problem because again, they expect somebody else to fix it. And that's where I normally say like the joy of doing things yourself is important because you can go out and make a difference and you can be in the front line and do things even though you're a CEO or you're vice president or executive vice president. It doesn't matter your title, right? If you're driven by truly solving problems for the company and make sure that you can actually get something better out of it, it's better, right?
That's a great life philosophy.
I think sometimes it gets me into trouble because you also have to be reminded about the strategy. But strategy is one thing, but if you can't survive to build a good strategy, it doesn't really matter, right? So I think that normally you say culture eats strategy for lunch, and that's where the culture have to be right, and then you have time to actually create a good strategy and a long-term vision.
Culture will eat strategy for lunch. Culture comes before the strategy. That makes sense. Makes
Culture
a lot of
and habits.
sense.
And again, habits about temperature difference between an office and a production environment.
Did you get them to like air condition the production facilities, or you didn't have enough time to do that?
We don't have enough time to do it. They were used to working in that environment, so I just what we did was that we ordered like a big truckload of fans, and then we put like a lot of airflow into the factory because we couldn't start all the air conditioning because of the electrical grid was not strong enough. Yeah,
makes sense. That's wild, man. 90 days, they were down 50% production. You got it up to where it was more than what you guys needed.
They didn't want it more, at least. So
they didn't need any more headlights.
And that's the philosophy of going all in, is that you continue until they say, I don't need it anymore. Because that's exactly where you know that you have solved the problem. Otherwise, there will always be excuses, right? There's somebody who's kind of like covering their butt with your problems. And once you get into that situation, you'll find another problem, right? That's how it works. So another thing will show up, and then you'll solve that problem.
That was a pretty critical time too in Tesla's history, because they were cash crunched and they could have been in financial straits.
Yes.
So that was an extremely important problem you guys had to solve.
That's probably also why I could convince Elon that we should do the good and bad cop. So what happens is that I said, like, I will continue to be the good cop if you can just one time call in and be the bad cop, right? So I said to him, you should just do it when I say now. So I called him one day and say, like, tomorrow at 2:00, you probably have to be the bad cop. So he was yelling on the phone, telling all the team how they were in bad shape and everybody should listen to me, and so. So
that's really how you took control, because you had to. I mean, to be able to take control.
Before that, but we just punched it with that.
Punched it through with that.
Yeah, they didn't have a choice. And then I called the owner and said, like, you better be here soon, because Elon is not happy with the situation, and I'm not happy either. So why don't you come and talk to me? And then we sat down and I talked to him about his leadership team, and I talked to him. There were some people that really were here for the paycheck, not for the job. So I think he should be very mindful about who he was trusting in the company. So there was some changes in the management team as well, because again, people didn't do enough for solving the problem, right?
Sure. And they let the problem go on for too long.
The problem was not starting if they were solving it, right?
That's true. That's incredible, man. That's an epic story.
So anyway, there was a lot of those situations in Tesla, and naturally, after some time, and you work 7 days a week, and one day your wife is saying to you, like, who do you want to be married to? Tesla or me? And actually, I want to be married with my wife. So
she's a good woman. She got good taste too.
She has good taste. So and she's an incredible, wife and mother. So I'd actually want to spend more time with her than in the factory all the time. So that was my choice in life, and that's where that I actually had a small detour to a startup company that did some good work around biology and fermentation and everything that is related to automation of genomes and everything else. So I couldn't really handle all this, that everything was like a liquid. So I couldn't see what I was doing. I didn't know what the product was because it was an organism that you couldn't see, right? So once Google called me one day, like a recruiter found out that I left Tesla. They could see apparently on my CV that it changed. Then they called me, and they heard about me from some sources that I could probably do a lot of things, and they wanted me to help with data centers and build them faster.
Wow.
So I got that job through.
And you were at Tesla for a long. 4.5 years as the top executive at Tesla is a long duration of time. That's pretty strict environment.
There's definitely people that have been at Tesla longer than me, and I really respect a lot of people that work for Tesla and have that resiliency to continue longer than I did. So I think that probably when I left my position in Tesla, it was things got more stable. So from that perspective,
because you guys were working there on the startup
phase.
It
less.
Sure.
But everybody told me after I left, it actually stabilized.
It leveled out and stabilized.
The bottleneck moved a little bit around, so the powertrain was not the issue anymore in the same manner they've been before.
I bet there's a big cultural change, though, going from Tesla, where it's like full court press, you're on all the time, demands and stakes are very, very high, to Google, which is more of a technology company. Like, they treat the employees really well. It's kind of like casual.
Absolutely.
And like
it is very different.
How was that transition?
It was difficult. It was very difficult. I I was search for the action in the start, and then I figured out I should just create my own action. So what happens is that when I came to Google, it took like 26 months to build a data center.
Wow.
And when I left, it took 9 months.
Wow.
And the cash flow that you need for that, because it's such a big company, you spend quite a lot of billions of dollars, like 2-digit billions, every year in infrastructure. And now with AI, that almost, it didn't double, but it almost doubled.
Wow.
So that means that it's a lot of investment in infrastructure. So if you take too long, you have too much work in progress, you have too much work in capital. And that's why that if you can squeeze that down and you can actually take a data center from when you decide to build it until it serves the market, if you can do this much faster, you can make like a quite a large net present value, which in this case was over 7 billion that I created of extra value for the company.
Wow, that's incredible. And
just
you
by
cut
building things faster.
faster, cutting it at the time.
And the way that you do it faster is that you take the data center, you put it on a scale, and you say, how much of this do we need? Right? Because everything in any company that have been here for longer than X amount of years starts a journey of complexity. They add this on over here, and they do this over here, and they put more products out there, and that happens to another companies if they're not careful. And they
get very inefficient then.
Yeah, it's the problem is that if you're not careful about your standardization and simplification and continue to embark on that journey, things will take too long, and you'll be in trouble with basically your build rates, and the same thing is that you'll start to deteriorate your profitability, right?
That's amazing. You literally cut the build time in a third and added $7 billion in value on those development projects. It's wild.
It is wild, and it's a big company, right? So you have to think about the culture is very different. It's a very software heavy company. So the data center is a hardware thing. So there's a group of hardware people in the company like doing chips and servers and network and data center infrastructure like buildings and cooling and heating and everything else. So that's a subset of the entire company. So probably more than 85 to 90% is doing all the software, and then 10% or 15% do the hardware. I think this is just layman terms. So please.
So for you to take the way that you describe it, take the weight out of the data centers and create more efficiencies, pull out the inefficiencies. Did you have to build your own team and like change culture, or were you able to take like the team and talent that was there and then help you find inefficiencies to get the end result? How did you do that?
It's both. So I replaced some of the leaders and find some talented people that knew that the culture about urgency has to be there. So you have to understand that it's not a choice whether you can build data center in 26 months or not. You have to do it faster because otherwise you'll start to deteriorate. You cannot build fast enough. You cannot put capacity enough out there for the journey that comes ahead. And also later we actually use the same technology about doubling the production capacity in the data centers that we then build. So from going from 100 megawatt, we can actually go up to 200 megawatt of power consumption for the servers, which is it's not a target in itself to consume power, but it's a way that you actually measure compute. So compute consume power, and power is kind of like the measurement of how much compute you're doing, right? So from that perspective, you can think about it like you build them much faster and you densify them inside at the same time. That gives you a really big upside. And that's why that Google have been able to deploy more AI servers than anyone else.
Really? They're beating the Chinese companies?
They are beating everyone.
Really? I wasn't aware of that.
Because you can actually go in and use the existing infrastructure, because the nature of the workloads are different. It's a little bit technical, so I don't want to go too deep into it, but it's kind of like you have storage, compute, and then you have training, and those work models are very different. And if you understand how they work, you can actually densify and still keep the reliability of the data centers, which is always light on.
That's wild. So what were some of the key things that you learned then being at Google and being in that technology space, which is somewhat different? What were your takeaways from that section?
My takeaway is that you can do a lot of important things with data. So, you use data. I'd used data in my entire life, but I never used data in a way of big data. Like you really try to find the pattern in all the numbers by using intelligent systems to figure out how they work, right? And that's where the AI kind of unlock new momentum of how you can actually continue to optimize your production, your capacity, and everything else. It's like if you want to optimize, it could be 25 different parameters for how to sell a vehicle in the best possible time of year with the best possible circumstances, and find out what options should you give the customers to actually maximize your profit. You can put that into different calculations nowadays. So you can, think about how all that actually works together. You can find out where your bottlenecks are by putting all the production data in and see where the problems are. You can do imagery recognition and see whether the quality is good enough, whether your build combination is correct. So all those data is now available, and you can access them and continue to build them and use them in a much smarter way than you ever could before.
So let's talk about just the philosophy behind it a little bit, because obviously you came from like very efficient companies, but especially Lego, where you said you obviously were trying to get more sustainable. Data centers are going to be a huge demand on energy going forward, but they're necessary to run AI. And although I know that like energy is technically never destroyed, it's only transferred from a design perspective, a lot of people view the data centers negatively because of the energy consumption that's needed. Like, how do you view that with your background and the philosophies that you have?
So Google Cloud is the greenest cloud you can possibly get hold of right now, because they're the biggest purchaser of green energy in the world.
Oh, so they're paying to offset it.
Well, you can call it offset it. I would call it like you are doing a step further, because they are not only buying renewable energy contracts through purchase agreements, but they actually do it in the country of which they consume the power. So think about it like if you have a state here in the US, you'll typically do the installation in the state where you're consuming the power, or at least in the country of the US where you are consuming the power. The same is they have like data centers in Holland and Japan and everything else, and they're basically going in and making their investments where they have the consumption, right?
But where does that money actually go when they pay that? Like, does it go to plant trees or like do something?
No, it goes to build like big wind turbine parks or solar parks, or even investing in nuclear power. So it goes into buying renewable power.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's increasing the capacity for what it is to actually build like gigawatts of extra power, again in wind turbines or whatever, geothermal, or whatever renewable source you might have. There's a lot of hydropower around in the world, so you actually use the rivers to create power. So if you can do that and put a data center next to a lot of places where there's a lot of water that's flowing, then you can power your data centers with basically the gravity, right?
That's where most of the Bitcoin miners are going to. They're all going to try to get their electric and energy costs to zero. Absolutely. Which is all those natural sources.
Yeah, but there is naturally places where it's difficult, where the infrastructure is not there, where the government is not investing yet, where they don't give the permit for doing it. So that's difficult. So there's a big data center in Taiwan, and that's where the grid is not as green as it is, for instance, if you go to Ohio, where they actually have a better situation for renewables, or you go maybe to Texas, where they have even or you can go to Carolina, where there's a lot of wind turbines.
That's awesome. So is there anything else with the Google that changed like your perspective or that influenced you? And then what was it that made you decide to leave and move on to GM?
Well, I was extremely happy at my time at Google, and it's a very good company. I learned a lot from the technical team. I had engineers. I was working in the engineering department. I was really having a lot of fun, right? I just felt that in that period of time, I don't know whether it was how complex the company was, or it was the whole kind of like the notions of that I could probably do a little bit more, I felt, for the company. So if I just had I could expand my wings and claim things, but I don't think that's kind of the way that I work. But in the end, I just didn't have the patience to wait for some retirement, some movements and everything else. I was thinking, this is really great, and I didn't have any desire to do anything else. But then Mary called me one day and asked me for the GM position. I was just like, oh, that's a big job. If I could help anything. And then I think also like I've been in Tesla, which was automotive, and automotive was, I think, was really fun to be a part of. So I wanted to go back and do automotive again and give it a try. So that's
and you love cars. You're a huge car guy too.
I'm a huge car guy. I love cars, no doubt about it. So I love everything about it: the design, the technology, the way that you can repair them yourself or get into, just to everything about it, and the way that you can play with the powertrain between electrical and combustion engine and combinations and hydrogen fuel cells, and there's just a lot of things that can propel those cars nowadays. So I think it's just a very exciting time for all the car manufacturers, but they're also tough times because it's more and more difficult to earn money on it.
Oh, for sure. Well, I'm sure working for GM is very different too, because Tesla is so vertically integrated. It's one of the only modern car companies that's extremely efficient, and I feel like GM, Ford, Chrysler, even Fiat, all these guys have very outdated models that were developed decades and decades ago, and they have so many inefficiencies. Was that challenging, like shifting and having a background in Tesla and then going to work for
I think the
one
thing
of
is
the old
that
guys, or not really?
It is difficult because there's a lot of things that kind of like I got used to with Tesla about doing things as simple as you can, make sure that you are efficient, try to take everything out you don't need from a vehicle. Naturally, the philosophy of the Detroit 3 are different. So again, like there's a lot of variants, there's a lot of options, there's a lot of things in the car. Like
they're not nearly as simple either.
They're not as simple. So if you think about how many parts are in a car for a GM vehicle or a Ford or a Tesla, there's no doubt that there is like much less parts in a Tesla. Now everything cannot look like a Tesla, so there's a market for differentiation. So you cannot make everything like look like a Tesla. And the reason for a Tesla to look like a Tesla is because of the air resistance, right? So you can build like a certain shape of a car that have a certain CV or like the aerodynamic that is around the car. So from that perspective, you want to make your car different from the others, and that limited you from the efficiency of the powertrain, because if you have too much wind resistance, your electrical car are not as, they don't drive as far in a charge as others unless you compensate with a bigger battery.
Makes sense.
And that's also why you can see that some of the 450 mile trucks are 200 kilowatt hour, where a Model S is 100 kilowatt hour. So they have like half the battery capacity. They don't drive as far. They don't drive 450, but they drive close to 360 or something, right? Mm-hmm. So it's to find that sweet spot of how much do you actually need and how do you build efficient, you can say, air resistance in the car.
So I know that you weren't at GM too long, obviously, just because like your personal situation changed. Do you think that you would have stayed with them for a long time if that outside situation hadn't occurred?
You can always guess on life circumstances.
Sure.
It's probably the first time where another company didn't call me. So I'm in a unknown territory right now, because this time it was my family who called me.
Sure. And
said like, listen, there's a life-changing situation. It was honestly my dad that passed away, and I got a kind of like a wake-up call that now it's only my mom left and my mother-in-law. We are far away from them from a time zone perspective, and then when our daughter was 18 years old, we sent her with an airplane back to Denmark to study at university. Our son stayed in Mexico. He wants to create a family and potentially consider to move back to Denmark as well. So we would like to spend a little bit more time with our older children and as well as our parents. We also have some friends from back in the days that we wanted to make sure that we don't lose totally by being out for 16 years. So that's a part of the reason for me. So I don't want to guess about how long time I've been with GM if this life situation was not happening, but it happened. So I'll more concentrate on it happened, and I made that choice right now.
Well, you've had an epic career, man. Just being focused on troubleshooting and solving problems and like having empathy and consideration for, the amount of lessons that I think that you've touched on are just, it's so inspiring.
And I think maybe to all the listeners out there, I think what you can concentrate around it, naturally you can learn a lot by having an education, but you can learn even more by going out and being where no people wants to be, or taking like a problem and solving it that is almost, it feels like unsolvable. that's another MBA you can get in life. Or if you want to work long time with a certain difficult problem, getting like a better capacity in a battery pack, then you can even get a PhD just by working with it. So I don't think everything is related to, going to a university and doing things. You can actually also learn by doing.
So if you were talking to like your 19-year-old self, but in today, if we're talking the 19 to 25-year-old like kid that's trying to figure life out and what they're good at and what they want to do, what kind of life advice would you give them based on your circumstances and the experiences you have?
I would first say that think about what values you have in life and what is your value system. Find out where you don't want to compromise things and stick to them, because it's important to have some, I don't know what I'm saying, like the line in the sand where you want to stand up for yourself. But I also want to say, like, take risk. There's nothing in this world that comes without a risk. It's just like, how do you manage that risk? How do you ensure that your risk tolerance is not prohibiting you trying things? Because your fantasy always takes you away for things that could happen. But what if you say, like, what have to be true for this not to happen? Or you can say, what is the worst thing that could happen? And then you can start to think about, well, it's probably not that bad, right? It's like being in an airport, the flight gets delayed, you get all upset about it. It's like, what is the worst thing that can happen? It's not so bad when it comes to...
It's not the end of the world.
No, it's not. You just have to put things in a context, right? So my 19 years old self is that I would probably give myself that advice to stick to your principles. I would continue to say, like, go out and try things and never be worried about failing. You will fail and you will learn from it. It's the way that you raise and dust yourself off and move on in life that is really what is important. Because you will, get into a place in your time and your career where things didn't work out the way you wanted, or they didn't like show up the way that you were expecting it, or you took a job that you shouldn't have taken, or that you did some other things in life that you regret, right? But again, just move on and don't let that kind of trouble you too much, because it is about how you figure out in the end, like, how do you truly go for what's energizing you?
It's a great perspective. What kind of skills would you focus on if you were a young person, or does that depend on their individual like traits? I mean, based on where technology is and where stuff's going, I mean, is there any skills that young people should focus on if they want to have similar competencies to you or be able to solve problems effectively?
I think everyone should, in the modern world, I would say, like, having a good take on data, understand how data is working, how you do all the modeling, how do you think about what you can get out of data, how you can ask all the you can say the world of compute and AI to help you, really. That's what I would say that modern young people should think about. And don't be so afraid of it if you use it correctly. You should use it for what it can do to help society, not necessarily what it can do to harm society. So in that perspective, be more like into the depth about the data discipline, because there's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of regulations. There's a lot of politicians. There's a lot of other things that is not data driven. And sometimes a good discussion about the data that's really in front of you and how you think about a certain outcome will help you. And I can just tell you another thing that I also learned from working in Tesla for some years is that, things are typically not physics, right? It's politicians. So, like, how do you create road safety? Some of it is data. Some of it is kind of like the physical things of cars and the way that they work. But some of it is also like regulation saying that this is how you should do it, right? So I think it's important that you find your way through all this to separate those things a little bit and not focus only on one of them. Because a lot of people are driven by politics. Some of them are driven by regulations, and others are driven by the law, and third are driven by physics and data, right? But I do believe that through all of it, there is a reality based on analytics and problem solving. That's
a great perspective. This has been awesome, man. few last lightning round closing questions, and I think we'll wrap up because I think that we've touched on a lot. What do you think the hardest decision was that you've ever had to make as a leader?
It's always to find out who you should kind of like bet on in your team and who you shouldn't. So I had to fire some people in my career, and those I still remember. And that's where it's been really tough to say to a person that's been working maybe 30 years in a company and saying that I cannot use you anymore. And the reason for that is that no one really told you that you are not living up to expectations before me. Those kind of things are really tough. So that's never a good thing. The thing from my perspective is that you have to deal with those situations, because again, the best thing you can do, if there's somebody who's not performing, tell them.
Sure.
If there's somebody who is annoying you, tell them. If there's somebody that are not really ethically correct for other colleagues, you need to go and fix it. The worst thing you can do is to turn around and ignore it, right? You should not react to everything in the world, but you should react to what is important for you.
No, it's true. A lot of people, because they're too scared of conflict to address things.
Exactly.
But it's like it usually makes the situation far worse than if you just addressed it.
And I understood in my career around that if you want to create a great performance culture, you have to sit down and take the tough discussions, not because you want to fire the person, because you want to help them. So the way that you help them is to saying that in those situations, you could do more of this. And I've seen in other situations that you're simply not reacting on a few things that I expect you to react on. So what is it that is stopping you in reacting in a certain way, right? So I think I know it's a little bit more generally, but all my experiences that I have around leading others and is that is one question really is like, why should they be led by you? So why should people follow you? Because followership is difficult. You have to earn it. You cannot build it. And when you earn followership, it's around that they trust you. They want to do what you're doing. They
respect you too, usually.
They can respect you. And so just ask one question. It's like, why should people be led by you and allowed to be led by you? Why should they? What deserve you to be a leader? What is that makes you the right person for this job, right? And I think if you ask yourself those questions, then you'll be leading with being an authentic leader. You'll be like a person you can trust. You can be loyal to others, and all of this comes with it. It's really down to human skills that is around being a holistic leader, right?
That is a great set of instructions as a guidebook to becoming a good leader. Honestly, man, I think that's where we should wrap this. That was excellent. Like that was the amount of advice that you condensed there in a short duration of time is extremely
and for
beneficial.
all people that doubts themselves, just those two questions, like what have to be true and how bad can it be?
The worst case scenario is usually not that bad.
What is the worst thing that can happen? And if you ask yourself that question, you always psychologically have like a way to think positive and always think about it cannot go that bad. And if you live by those two philosophies, I'm sure you can make it far in life.
It's been awesome. JP, thank you, man, so much for doing this. It was extremely beneficial for me, too. I learned a ton in these. It's a great time. Where can people and the listeners like follow you in your next chapter? I mean, I know you're moving back to Denmark and you've got a new adventure and a new company, but if they want to keep tabs on your life and career journey, where can they find you?
They can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm not on too many social media.
That's for your benefit.
I don't know it's my benefit or not, but my wife is taking care of the relations privately on some of those platforms. I take care of the more professional LinkedIn, and I think people can always reach out to me, send me a note, whatever you want to do to get hold of me. You can always do that. So I'm here to help, and that's my life philosophy.
Well, I'm hoping that I can come visit you in Denmark at some point, and maybe
Absolutely.
we can do a part 2, and maybe we can talk a little more about cars, because I know you got a lot of passions and you've owned a lot of great cars over the years. So
yeah,
that would be a fun conversation as well. But
and remember, 60% of all cars sold in Denmark is electrical by now.
That's a wild.
Only Norway is higher. So things are changing.
Well, that percentage is going to change when you bring in some gas guzzlers. I'm just kidding. Some of your collectors.
They'll be hitting They'll be hiding in the garage.
You gotta keep them hidden. JP, it was a pleasure, brother. Thank you for making time, man. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming out. Guys, thanks for stopping by the Bulldogs podcast. Again, I'm James Danley, and looking forward to the next one. I would love to see your comments, questions, takeaways from this podcast. So much to learn, and hopefully you can apply it to your career, to your life. And life is what you make it. There's a lot of opportunity in this world, and your reality is what you craft for yourself. So until next time, cheers.
Thanks, James.
Dude,